Hello everybody and welcome back for another edition of the Kickstarter Weekly. Today's episode is covering games that will complete their funding from November 8th through the 14th. I have 6 games to talk to you about today. One of those games actually should have been covered last video, so I'm going to sneak it in here at the front. And that game is called Grove. Now, Grove is going to complete its funding on November 7th, which is Sunday, which is actually the day after I'm filming this video. They had a minimum required funding goal of $3,000. They're currently sitting at $42,000, which is about 14 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, Grove is a solo game, so it's a game for one player. It plays in about 5 to 10 minutes, so it's a very quick game. The complexity on this one is light, and we're going to call the risk on this campaign medium high. So this game is a solo game. It's going to have the player playing it picking fruit to fulfill recipe requirements. It's also an 18 card game, so it's very similar in that sense to the games that Button Shy puts out, but it's not a Button Shy game. And it's also a sequel to Orchard, which is another smaller solo playing card game. Mark Tuck is both the designer and the artist for Grove. And as both a designer and an artist, he has previously worked on Orchard, Raging Bulls, and Snooker Solitaire. And the game is being published by Side Room Games, and their highest rated games on Board Game Geek are Black Sonata, Marquee, and Orchard. Now, a quick note here, when I'm talking about pledge prices for games, I'm talking about the cost in US dollars. And I don't include shipping in the prices that I named because they're going to be different for every country, and they're even different if you live in Hawaii, Alaska, or Puerto Rico. So I just don't include shipping prices, and I leave that to you to investigate and find out what that's going to be for wherever you live. Also, the campaigns for all the games that I'm talking about are linked below in the description. So if anything that I'm saying interests you and you're finding that you want to go learn more about it and possibly back it, you can just go down into the description, click on that link, and it will take you over to the campaign. So there are 2 pledge levels here for Grove. The first is a $15 pledge. It's called Harvester, and that will get you Grove. The second pledge is a $28 pledge. It's called Combined Harvester, and that will get you Grove and the previous game in the series, also by Mark Tuck, called Orchard. Finally, Side Room Games is planning to deliver Grove in June of 2022. From there, we go to the first of 4 games that will be funding on November 11th. The first is called Circadians Chaos Order, and you can also get the previous game in the series, First Light, through this campaign as well. That's going to be the 2nd edition of First Light. So the actual name of the campaign is Circadians Chaos Order plus First Light 2nd edition. It's a mouthful. Now, Chaos Order had a minimum required funding goal of $16,000. They're currently sitting at $88,000, which is about 5.5 times that minimum required funding goal. This is a game for 2 to 5 players. It's going to play in about 2 to 4 hours, so it's a longer game. It is of heavy complexity, and the risk here is low. Now, Circadians is a planned trilogy of games by Garpell Games, and they're probably better known for putting out the Of the North Sea trilogy and the Of the West Kingdom series, and they just announced a new trilogy in that line called Of the South something. I forget the actual name, but it's Of the South something, and it's going to take place in parts of the world that aren't quite as Anglo-centric as the first 2 series. Before they're done, they plan to put out a 4th trilogy of games in that series, so it will be like a North something, a West something, an East, and a South. But simultaneously, they're also working on this trilogy of science fiction games, which are a little lesser known. Now, the first game in that series, First Light, was a worker placement game. The new game in this series, Chaos Order, is more area control using action drafting. There are 2 designers on this game. S.J. McDonald has previously worked on Architects of the West Kingdom, Circadians First Light, and Paladins and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. The other designer is Zach Smith, and this looks to be his first published design. The artist is Sam Phillips, who has previously worked on Circadians First Light, Hadrian's Wall, and Raiders of Scythia. And the publisher, Garpell Games, their 5 highest rated games on Board Game Geek are Architects of the West Kingdom, Paladins of the West Kingdom, Raiders of the North Sea, Raiders of Scythia, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. So there are really 3 different pledge levels here in this campaign, but if you look at the pledge levels, there are a lot more than 3, and the reason for that is those pledge levels are language specific. So there are specific pledge levels for Spanish, French, and Portuguese. But if you're just looking at the English pledge levels, there are 3. Now, there are 2 pledge levels at the $54 level. One of those is for Chaos Order, and that's the name of the pledge, Chaos Order. The other pledge level is First Light 2nd Edition, and if you pledge at that level, you will get a copy of the new 2nd edition of First Light, which is the previous first game in the Circadians series. If you want both of those games, you can pledge at the $107 pledge level called Both Games, and you will get both games. And finally, Garpel Games is shooting to deliver Circadians Chaos Order and First Light 2nd Edition in July of 2022. Also completing its funding on November 11th is Lords of Ragnarok, but this is over on Gamefound. So you'll want to go to Gamefound to take a look at this, and if you click on the link below, it will take you to the campaign at Gamefound. Now, Lords of Ragnarok had a $53,000 minimum required funding goal. They're currently sitting at $1.4 million, which is about 24 times that initial minimum required funding goal. Lords of Ragnarok is a game for 1 to 4 players. It's going to play in about 90 minutes. It's a game of heavy complexity, and we're going to set the risk on this one at low. Now, Lords of Ragnarok is being billed somewhat as a re-implementation of Lords of Hellas. There are a lot of mechanics in common, and if you know Lords of Hellas, it should give you a leg up on learning Lords of Ragnarok. They're based on the same system, and they're very similar. However, it's not just a simple reskinning either. There are new mechanics here in Lords of Ragnarok that are not in Lords of Hellas. I think whether or not a person's collection has room for both games is probably going to depend on the individual person and how much they think that the differences between the 2 games merit owning both. But I have a feeling that's going to be different from person to person. There will be differences, though. It is not just a clean reskin of the game with no changes to gameplay. Now, both games, and certainly Lords of Ragnarok, are dudes on a map games, and once you get past all of the kind of Euro mechanics and the miniatures and all that stuff, you're really looking at a war game. And the main mechanic here within that kind of war game, I think, is area control. Now, Lords of Ragnarok is designed by Adam Kwapinski, who has previously designed In Between Lords of Hellas and Nemesis. The art is by Cesar Ayala Delgado, and this appears to be his first published game. And the publisher here is Awakened Realms, who have previously produced such games as Etherfields, Lords of Hellas, Nemesis, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, and this War of Mine, the board game. So they've had some very big hits with those games. Now, there are really 3 pledge levels for Lords of Ragnarok, but there are a lot of add-ons, and the pledges don't necessarily cover everything that are in the add-ons. So I am going to go over the add-ons separately and talk about what you might want to do in terms of how you pledge this. The first pledge level, though, is $114. It's called Core, and that's going to get you the core game and a box of stretch goals. And for campaigns that are big like this, these big miniatures, dudes on a map game, it's fairly standard that they take all the stretch goals and kind of put them together in one big box, which is almost its own expansion. And when you kind of look at it and see all the different stretch goals, it amounts to a lot of different cosmetic upgrades, as well as usually different modules that you can throw in the game that will give you some variability and change up gameplay a bit. So you're going to get both of those things in the core pledge. For $172, you can pledge the gameplay bundle. And that's going to include the same 2 boxes as the core pledge, but you're going to add in 2 expansions. One is called Seas of Aegir, and the other one is called Utgard Realm of the Giants. Now, the Realm of the Giants expansion is a smaller one, and it adds in 4 giant miniatures that are going to interact with the game. The Seas of Aegir expansion is more expensive, and that's going to add in naval combat for the players. They're going to have boats, and it will give players not only new pieces to play with, but also new mechanics that will change up the gameplay a bit. Now, for $195, you can pledge the Mythic Pledge, However, if you do that, you're not getting either of those two expansions. They're kind of backing those out. What you will get instead is the terrain expansion, and then you're going to get Sundrop on the terrain expansion, the main core game, and the stretch goals components. You'll also get the enhanced runes without Sundrop and an art book. So it's kind of weird because neither one of those pledges gives you everything. If you get the most expensive one, you're not getting two of the expansions. If you pledge the middle one, you're getting both the expansions, but you're not getting the enhanced runes, the art book, or the terrain expansion, and you're not getting Sundrop on anything. So that's going to bring us to the add-ons. So the first add-on is the Valkyrie Hero, which will cost $7.50, assuming that you hadn't followed the campaign previously to launching. If you did that, then you'll be getting the statue automatically just as a thank you. But if you didn't follow early and you still want that statue, you can add it on for $7.50. It's a new playable hero. Now, those two expansions that we talked about, Seas of Aegir and Utgard Realms of the Giants, they're each available at two different prices, one without Sundrop and one with. And there's not that much of an increase from no Sundrop to Sundrop. So for people who like Sundrop, that's probably a good thing to hear. It's not going to cost you that much more. So Utgard Realms of the Giants without Sundrop is $23, with Sundrop is $28. Seas of Aegir is $40 without Sundrop and $51 with Sundrop. And just remember, if you're doing that mythic pledge and you're kind of wanting everything and you're getting that version with the Sundrop on the main game, the stretch goals, and the terrain expansion, you're probably going to want to get those two expansions with the Sundrop, and you'll have to add them on. So just make sure that when you're adding them to your pledge, you choose the Sundrop versions if you want to be consistent. The enhanced runes, when purchased separately, are $10 as an add-on, and the art book is $20 as an add-on. Finally, the terrain expansion as an add-on is $29. So here's a couple things to remember when you're pledging this. First, if you pledge for something that's more expensive than what you eventually end up ordering, you're going to be paying more than you should. And in situations like that, it can be hard to get a credit. Some publishers may want to take that extra money as a donation. Now, that's not the case with all publishers. Many publishers will, credit you back if there's a discrepancy, but they're not obligated to do that. And I think that's probably not a good situation to put yourself in. So I think the better tactic to take here, if you're unsure of what you want to pledge, because there may be a situation in the pledge manager where there are other options that aren't listed here. For instance, to get the core box with the Sundrop without having to get the mythic pledge. Because right now, the only way to get Sundrop on the core box and the kind of stretch goals is to pledge at that $194 mythic pledge rate. And if you pledge at the gameplay bundle level, then you're getting those two expansions without Sundrop. So my advice here to you is to pledge the cheapest thing that you can that is what you know that you want. And then if you want to increase what you're pledging later in the pledge manager down the line, you can do that once you see what maybe other add-ons are, because they may add in kind of some more things like individual add-ons with Sundrop. They may even add in pledge levels later that include Sundrop. So I personally am looking to pledge this one, and here is how I think that I'm going to do it. I know I already have the Valkyrie Hero because I followed the campaign before it launched, so I know I'm getting that for free. I also know that I do not want the art book. I don't have much use for art books. I don't like spending extra money on something I might page through once or twice and then put on a shelf and never look at again. So I don't want the art book. I do want everything else, and I want it with Sundrop wherever that's available. At the same time, I don't want to cobble together a purchase that's going to be more expensive than what a bundle could be in the future and end up overpaying now and have to try to pursue a credit later if I switch to a bundle with a cheaper rate when it presents itself in the pledge manager. So I'm probably going to pledge at the gameplay bundle rate, which is $172, with the idea that I will, in the pledge manager, later add on the enhanced ruins and the terrain expansion. And then if I need to do anything to get Sundrop, I can alter my pledge. And I will. I just don't want to get into that kind of situation where I'm pledging more than I end up spending, at the end because I was doing everything piecemeal. So that is kind of how I would recommend doing it. Do the first or the second pledge and then figure out everything else kind of in the pledge manager. And finally, Awaken Realms is planning on delivering Lords of Ragnarok in June of 2022. Also funding on November 11th is Paint the Roses, and for this campaign we go back to Kickstarter and we will stay on Kickstarter for the remainder of these currently running campaigns. So Paint the Roses started with a minimum required funding goal of $20,000. They're currently sitting at $273,000, or about 14 times that minimum required funding goal. Paint the Roses is a game for 2 to 5 players that's going to play in about 50 to 70 minutes, which is a odd, I think, time to kind of estimate. Why not just say an hour, or 45 to 115? But they have specified 50 to 70 minutes. This is a game of light complexity, and we're going to put the risk here at medium-low. Now, this is essentially a cooperative game that combines puzzles and tile placement, and it's set in the world of Alice in Wonderland. So the theme here is that players are gardeners for the Queen of Hearts, and they're trying to do the Queen of Hearts' bidding and trim her hedges and garden her garden according to her whims. Now, Paint the Roses is designed by Ben Goldman. He has previously designed a game called Oceans. The art is by Jackie Davis, who is an amazing, very prolific artist. She does great work, one of my favorite board game artists. And she's previously worked on Colosseum, Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, Stockpile, Viticulture, and Viticulture Essential Edition. And the game is being published by North Star Games. They're probably best known for the Evolution series. So their highest rated games over at BGG include Evolution, Evolution Climate, Oceans, The Quacks of Quedlinburg, and The Taverns of Tiefenthal. And there are 3 different pledge levels for Paint the Roses. The first is for $30. It's called The Gardener, and that's going to get you the retail version of the game with a Kickstarter exclusive module. Now, if you pledge at the $55 level, that's called the Cheshire Cat. That is going to add an expansion into your pledge. You'll still be getting the retail version of the base game, though. The expansion is called Escape the Castle, and that is made of 6 different modules that you can add into the base game as you choose. Now, ironically, for only $5 more, which is $60, and that is the Queen of Hearts pledge, you are going to get the game and the expansion, but you're going to get the deluxe versions of those. Now, what that means in this campaign is that you will get a main board that is dual layered. You'll also get acrylic tiles for all the tiles in the game instead of cardboard tiles that are in the retail box, and you also get a Game Trays custom designed insert. So, I mean, for my money, $55 or $60, the $60 is the better components. I would be pledging that one. And finally, North Star Games is aiming to deliver Paint the Roses in April of 2022. Our last game that is going to fund on November 11th is called Steam Up, A Feast of Dim Sum. They had a minimum required funding goal of $32,000. They're currently sitting at about $340,000, which is about 10.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 2 to 5 players. It plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. We're going to put the complexity at medium light here, and unfortunately the risk is going to be high. And what this game is a set collection and recipe game. And they are a dime a dozen. There are a lot of them out there. Some of them are good, some of them are not. What makes this game, I think, different or distinguishes a little bit from some of the others is the components and the fact that you are creating dim sum and you have very attractive, kind of fun components that work with that theme. Steam Up has 3 different designers, and this is a first for all of them. And they are Pauline Kong, Heyman Lee, and Marie Wong. There are also 3 artists on this game, and again, this appears to be the first published game for all 3 artists. They are Grace Chiahadi, Tim Cheng, and YDX Art. And finally, Steam Up is being published by Hot Banana Games, and this looks to be their first published game. So that's the reason for the higher risk on this campaign. The 3 designers, the 3 artists, and the publisher is a first for everything. That also means it's their first time doing a Kickstarter too. So a lot of firsts, higher risk. Pledging this game is very simple. There are 2 different pledge levels. For $48, you can pledge the standard edition of the game. For $64, you can pledge the deluxe version of the game. And let's talk about the differences here, because I think that's very important, especially for a game like this, where the mechanics and the gameplay isn't really anything new. But to me, what makes this compelling is the components. And so I think if you're going to purchase this, you want the version with the nicer components. That's kind of what makes this game worth playing or having, in my opinion, if you think it's worth having. So there are both player boards called animal boards in the game and a scoreboard. And if you just get the standard version of the game, those are going to be cardstock. If you get the deluxe version, those are going to be cardboard, I think a millimeter thick. So not super thick, but definitely there's more to it than the very kind of flimsy cardstock that you'll be getting in the standard version of the game. You've also got resources in this game. They're going to be kind of dim sum components. And if you get the standard version of the game, you're going to be dealing with essentially cardboard tokens. If you get the deluxe version, you're going to get these very nice kind of squishy things. I think some of the squishy berries, I think, in Everdell. But that's what it is. It's kind of physical, squishy components you can pick up and touch and feel. And there's definitely more going on with that than just cardboard tokens. There's also a draw bag that you're going to be pulling the tiles from as you're playing the game. And if you get the deluxe version, there's going to be a silkscreen printing on that draw bag, whereas in the standard version, it's just plain. There's also a first player marker and animal scoring markers. So if you get the standard version of the game, those are going to be, cardboard tokens. But if you get the deluxe version of the game, those are going to be wooden pieces, and the animal scoring markers have printing on both sides of those meeply type wooden scoring markers. Finally, this is a dim sum game, and you're going to have little kind of containers that the dim sum comes in, that you're kind of drafting and taking and getting the resources from. So if you get the standard version of the game, those are going to be made from punchboard. So they're going to be kind of flimsy. But if you get the deluxe version of the game, they're actually going to be kind of a wooden component. And in either case, you're going to have to assemble these things, but the wooden components are going to be sturdier and hopefully longer lasting than this kind of punchboard. So there you have the differences. If you don't really feel that all of those component upgrades are necessary, if they're not appealing to you, then just pledge the standard version. If you, like me, think that those things probably make the game, then get the deluxe version. And lastly, Hot Banana Games is planning on delivering Steam Up A Feast of Dim Sum in April of 2023. So just another little 2023, a reminder that it's not going to be delivered in 6 months. We're talking a year and a half. The last game on our list for today is going to fund on November the 14th. It is Marvel Dice Throne. Now, this campaign had a minimum required funding goal of $100,000. They're currently sitting at $1.6 million, which is 16 times that minimum required funding goal. Dice Throne is a game for 2 to 6 players, plays in about 20 to 40 minutes. The complexity level on these games, because there are others, there's a Dice Throne Season 1. They did another version of it, Dice Throne Season 1 Rerolled, so they kind of put it all together. And they have a Dice Throne Season 2 Battle Chest. So the Season 1 Rerolled is essentially a battle chest just like Season 2. So there's kind of 2 big collections, and now they're doing a Marvel version. So the complexity on all of these games is medium-low, and we're going to put the risk here at low. Now, these games are fighting, dice rolling, and dice mitigation, and take that. And I love them. I really, really like Dice Throne. And I'm not really the gamer that this is for. But it's so well designed. And, on one level, it's a very simple fighting game. You're kind of just rolling dice and fighting each other. But the way that you use both dice and tokens and the choices that you get for, how you use the dice and the tokens, it creates a lot of choices. And so even as a heavier gamer, it's a simple game and it's kind of quick and fun and all that, but I still feel like I have really, really good choices, so I'm not just watching the game play itself. There is a lot of strategy and tactical choices that you make that will determine how you do in this game. So having all that, it really does appeal to me. Now, if you're wondering what characters are in this, they've done a pretty interesting job of having a diverse group of characters here. So you've got Black Panther, Black Widow, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, Loki, Miles Morales, Scarlet Witch, and Thor. I'm not sure if I would have put Thor in there, but a lot of the others are pretty cool to me. I would love to see them, put some kind of weird characters in here like Howard the Duck or Nightcrawler. I think would be fun to play with his teleporting. But this is kind of the first entry for them in this. They're not coming out with, hundreds of characters like they did with Marvel United, but I think considering the IP here, that it's Marvel, and that Dice Throne is already really popular, and that this campaign is already doing really well, I would not be surprised if in the future we get more of this and more characters. And I think this group of 8 characters is a really good starting point, and I think it's going to appeal to a wide group of gamers. Now, the other thing is there is a game out there called Dice Throne Adventures, and you can take any of your Dice Throne characters from either the Season 1 or the Season 2 Battle Chest and take them into Dice Throne Adventures, where you're essentially doing a cooperative dungeon crawl with those characters. So normally when you play Dice Throne, you're just fighting 1 versus 1, or you're playing kind of a round of, a bunch of people. So it's just everyone's fighting each other. If you use some of the boss characters from Dice Throne Adventures, you can do a 1 versus many and have one player play one of those kind of really powerful boss characters and have the other players playing, normal characters and all fighting against that boss. I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't take these Marvel characters and bring them into Dice Throne Adventures and kind of play this cooperative dungeon crawler with these Marvel Dice Throne characters. Now, Dice Throne Adventures is not available here through this campaign, but I'm just kind of, speculating that that is a way that you could use these characters. I see no reason that you couldn't bring the Marvel Dice Throne characters into Dice Throne Adventures, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's something that I'm planning to do. However, I also would not be surprised if down the road we see a Marvel-themed version of Dice Throne Adventures that is kind of more specific to the Marvel universe in how the game is designed and what they're kind of naming things within the game and the resources and all that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the future. But until then, you could always take your Marvel characters and bring them into Dice Throne Adventures if you can find a copy of that and play that way. And I plan on doing that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But something to think about. Now, Marvel Dice Throne has 3 designers. 2 of them have kind of been with Dice Throne since the beginning. The very first Season 1 was produced independently by Nate Chatelier and Manny Tremblay as kind of a passion project. And Roxley got wind of it, and they saw what a good game it was and how they could maybe increase the production value. And so they brought them into the Roxley fold. They did the Season 2 Battle Chest together, and then they kind of reprinted Season 1 stuff, bringing it all together in a Battle Chest-like version called Dice Throne Season 1 Rerolled. So Gavin Brown, really Roxley is kind of Gavin Brown's company, so he kind of came on board when Roxley bought that property. But he really didn't have any design influence on those games. So if we look at Gavin Brown as a designer, he has previously worked on Brass Birmingham, Jab Real-Time Boxing, and Super Motherload. And then the other 2 designers here are Nate Chatelier and Manny Tremblay, and they have previously worked on Dice Throne Season 1, Dice Throne Season 1 Rerolled, and Dice Throne Season 2 Battle Chest. They've also both worked on Dice Throne Adventures, but that game just hasn't kind of risen into the BGG Top 1000 yet. And as an artist, Manny Tremblay, who is the artist for all of the Dice Throne stuff, he's also the artist here on Marvel Dice Throne. His big credits previously are Dice Throne Season 1, Dice Throne Season 1 Rerolled, and Dice Throne Season 2 Battle Chest. Finally, Roxley, as a publisher, their top 5 rated games at BGG include Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire, Dice Throne Season 1, Dice Throne Season 2 Battle Chest, and Santorini. Now, there's only one pledge level here, and that is $84, and that is called Battle Chest. So if you want to pledge Marvel Dice Throne, you are pledging that pledge level. It's also going to come with some free promos. However, there are some add-ons and there are some add-on bundles. And if you also pledge an add-on bundle, it's going to be the same thing as if you pledged kind of like a higher pledge level. They just don't have it listed that way. So there are a whole assortment of neoprene playmats. You don't need them, but if you want to play on them, that's a cosmetic extra. They are $20 each. You can get a package of all the sleeves that you're going to need for Marvel Dice Throne, and the add-on price for that is $39. There's also a collapsible dice tray that you can add on for $15. And finally, if you want to kind of bundle all that together, there's an $80 bundle that pulls together 2 different playmats. I believe you're going to be able to choose which 2 you want, the sleeves and the dice tray. And if you're kind of adding on those things separately, it's $94. So it's a $14 savings. So if you did that, you're looking at an $84 pledge and an $80 addition for that bundle. So it would be the equivalent of a $164 pledge, assuming they had one that kind of included all that stuff. They don't, but this is the way that you can kind of put that together on your own. And lastly, Roxley is looking to deliver Marvel Dice Throne in June of 2022. So that brings us to the end of the currently running Kickstarter section for today. I do have 2 backed games from last video, 2 games that I personally backed that I'd like to talk to you about very quickly. So the first of those games is Bardwood Grove, and it's a game by Final Frontier Games. They most recently did Merchant's Cove, and Bardwood Grove is being, similar names, right? Bardwood Grove, Merchant's Cove. If there are others in the series, it'll be interesting to see what kind of rhyming name convention they come up with. But Bardwood Grove, the designer, Carl Van Ostrand, was one of the designers on Merchant's Cove. And this game is more of a deck building and tableau building game, but there is a character in Bardwood Grove that you can take over into Merchant's Cove. In fact, if you didn't want Bardwood Grove, it was possible to pledge just for that character for Merchant's Cove. But I personally wanted the actual Bardwood Grove game, so I did get that. I also pledged for Too Many Bones Unbreakable. And this is a series that I've pledged for previously. For anyone who is thinking of getting this, I would recommend to get a base game. And then if you wanted to kind of expand the gameplay, you could get Age of Tyranny and 40 Days of Dolor. Those are specifically for the original base game. There are versions of those expansions for the new game, Unbreakable. But those expansions will allow you to kind of expand what you can do and how you play with the base game. There are also expansions that are additional characters, but they'll just give you more choices in gameplay. They won't actually kind of give you more variability. And there are a bunch of characters in the base game. So if you're looking to kind of broaden that, maybe buy those things first. And that's what I did. I got those things. I got some premium health chips, and it's a great game. So now I'm kind of looking to get the rest of it, which means that my pledge for Too Many Bones was kind of my big pledge for this month, for November, because it actually did fund in the first few days of November. And if you don't know what Too Many Bones is, it is a kind of dungeon crawler, role-playing type game, and you're going to be using bag building with dice. And then as you kind of play your game over a series of little mini adventures, your characters are going to bulk up. You will make them more powerful as you build out their tech trees, and then you'll eventually get to the end of a little mini campaign and you'll fight a big boss. So like a lot of video games where you kind of build up your characters, you're doing that in a campaign of Too Many Bones, and how you play that character will in some way depend on how you change the character and evolve the character within what's available in their trees. It's just got great components. I think Chip Theory Games makes some of the best components in all of board games. It is a really top-notch affair. The one thing that maybe people want to know about is there's not much in terms of a board. So when you play this game, you're basically playing this on this little kind of mat where you're stacking the chips. And then all of the combat takes place with characters and bad guys that are essentially stacks of poker chips. And as they fight and lose health, you take out health chips and the stacks decrease until the creatures die and their stacks go away. So there's not a lot of board in this. It's kind of all in your mind. the fights and the adventures that you're going on, and you're using this little, it's almost abstract in a way. It's like playing an abstract game where you've got this little kind of mini grid neoprene mat and you're having all your combat battles in there. It's a fantastic, very, very well produced game. And for people who like, upgrading things and rolling lots of chunky dice, role-playing games in general, and kind of abstract style games, it's an amazing purchase. I also had a few acquired games since the last video. So I received a box of games that I had ordered, I think maybe from Card House, not 100%. And in that box was Fantasy Realms, which is a game that I very much enjoy. It's kind of a filler game, very light. I don't have a lot of these games, so I like to have a few, and I'm very kind of selective about what I have. Fantasy Realms is a game where you're trying to assemble or curate a hand of cards, and they're going to score off each other. And so as you're playing the game, you may have some cards that kind of work together, and you may find some other cards you want to draft that may or may not work so well with those cards. So you're kind of always changing your hand and trying to get better combinations. And then once you get to the end of the game, what you're left with, musical chairs in your hand, will determine how you score. Jamie Stegmaier made a game called Red Rising within the last couple of years, and he acknowledged that he designed Red Rising based on Fantasy Realms. He added in some mechanics, he changed it around a little bit, but I have to say, for my money, Fantasy Realms is still the far superior game. So I did get Red Rising. I actually made a video on it. I'll link it below if you want to check out that video. But I think Fantasy Realms is the better game. It's a little simpler mechanically, but the potential for cards that play off each other better is higher in Fantasy Realms. And I think trying to assemble that hand, there's more risk and excitement in Fantasy Realms. And oftentimes you're really kind of trying to pull something off. And in Fantasy Realms, you often can or do. Red Rising just doesn't have that same level of, I think, perfection in the design. And something that I'm noticing more and more from Stegmaier Games is they don't really seem to play test their games enough. They seem to put out the games now and let the public play test it, and then put out expansions to kind of fix the shortcomings of the game. I'm becoming less a fan of Stonemaier Games the more this is becoming their routine. So when I first got Tapestry, I thought that game was hot garbage. And I know that they have a couple expansions out now, but there's so much that they have to fix to bring balance to Tapestry that I don't think I'm going to actually touch the expansions. I'm probably just going to sell my base copy of Tapestry. And certainly for Red Rising, which I think may actually be one of the better games they've put out lately, it's still nowhere near as good as Fantasy Realms. Fantasy Realms had just been out of print for a while. So it came back in print. They did a new printing of it. I was able to pick it up. I do want to add on the expansion called The Cursed Horde, but that means Red Rising is leaving my collection, and I am very happy about that exchange. So Fantasy Realms, newly acquired. I also got in Imperial Steam, which I've been reading a lot of favorable things about from Jennifer Schlickband. She's worked before as a game designer, and she has a YouTube channel now, and she's doing some really cool work. So I'd recommend go check out her channel. And you know what? I'll link that below as well in the description. But she really made me want Imperial Steam, combined with the fact that it's being published by Capstone Games, which in the last year or two has become one of my favorite retail publishers. The amount of good games and the percentage of really great games that Capstone has been publishing is off the charts. So it's to the point now where if they publish a game, it's almost a must-buy for me. And certainly with someone like Jennifer, who I respect her tastes, and I think she has a lot of good input, if she's giving a Capstone game high praise, I'm there. So that was also in the package. 2 expansions came for Isle of Skye, which I got about a year ago, I think. And at that time, I couldn't get the expansions. They were out of print. They were available again. So I added Isle of Skye Druids and Isle of Skye Journeyman to my collection. And then the fifth item in the box was an expansion for Lorenzo El Magnifico. That is the Houses of Renaissance expansion. So I got Fantasy Realms, I got Imperial Steam, and then I got 3 expansions to make 2 games that I already own better, presumably, and more variable, and just kind of add some more stuff to those games. Finally, I have 2 played games this period. The first of those is Coffee Traders, which I had played previously. I am actually going to be working on a first impressions video for Coffee Traders. What I can tell you about it now is that it is a very heavy Euro. It's very fiddly in its rules and gameplay. One of my friends who loves heavy games called it one of the most convoluted games he's ever seen. He still likes it. It's just, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of kind of fiddly stuff to it. So I think this one is for heavier gamers only, and I think heavier gamers should know that there are a lot of rules exceptions, and the iconography in the game isn't always the easiest to read kind of as you're learning it. There's a lot happening on the player boards. There's a lot of iconography. I think there are more player components in Coffee Traders than any other game I've ever played before. There's just a lot of stuff. It looks overwhelming. Once you start playing it and you start to kind of wrap your brain around everything, it's a fantastic game. It just has a high barrier to entry. Another friend of mine says he definitely wants to play Coffee Traders again, but he never wants to play it with anyone who hasn't already played it, which that's tough. You know, people have to learn somehow. But it is one of those games that it's a long teach, and there are a lot of opportunities for people to not understand things or have questions. So you have to know going in that there's a time investment to playing the game, and even more so to teaching the game. Now, on the box for Coffee Traders, it is listed as a 3 to 5 player game. However, there is a 2-player variant. And so that's what I played this week. I taught a friend of mine who actually owns the game, but hasn't played it yet. I taught the game to him. I thought, it'd be kind of more fun and easier for him to learn with someone helping. And in that 2-player variant, it uses a kind of third dummy AI player. So we kind of had to deal with that a little bit. It's fine. I think the purpose of the AI player is there. He doesn't really kind of mess players up too much. It seems like he's there really so that the different regions on the board will produce more coffee when they do that in that part of the game. I think without the dummy player there wouldn't be enough coffee getting produced for the 2 players to really do that much. So unlike some games where the kind of dummy AI player is there to get in your way and block things, that didn't seem to be so much the case here. It just seemed to be a necessity so that you could have gameplay that was functional. And it served its purpose. I was fine with it. I probably would choose to play this game at higher player counts when I can. But if I had a friend who wanted to play it at 2, I think the game plays fine at 2 players. And just overall, in terms of Coffee Traders, right now I'm giving a rating of about 9. That was my initial rating when I first played the game. I loved it. I was a little bit worried about, some of the complexity of it. But having played it a second time now, I think that high rating is going to stand. I think the game is really, really good, really solid. The only thing about it I think players need to know as they get their feet wet with it is that this game, to an extreme, is one of those games where you look at it and there are so many things that you could do. And if you try to do a little bit of everything, you're going to end up doing not much of anything. So this is a game where you really need to pick out maybe 2 or 3 things and focus on those and try to score points, using those mechanics and those systems, and not ignore the rest of the game, but certainly don't put a lot of value on it. Because if you try to weight everything in the game equally and keep all of the plates, spinning, you're going to drop them all. So you have to choose and pick. And once you know that and develop a strategy that's informed by that kind of thinking, you're going to be fine. And for people who are okay with that and love heavy Euros, this is one of the best games of 2021. I haven't finished playing all of the games that are going to be published in 2021 that I want to play. I mean, some of them haven't even been published yet. But so far, Coffee Traders is my number 5 game for the year and my second favorite Euro. The first one being Kanban EV. And then the other 3 games that I have ranked ahead of it right now are Sleeping Gods, Dice Throne Adventures, and Imperium Classics. And you could put Imperium Legends in with Imperium Classics. I just haven't touched Legends yet, but I know it plays the exact same way as Classics. So Coffee Traders, right now, number 5 game of 2021, 9.0. The Euro that would be next in line after that for me is Excavation Earth. I think that's at number 6 right now on my list. So a high recommendation from me for Coffee Traders, and be looking for my first impressions video on it, which I probably will shoot this week. The other game I got to play was Dinosaur World, which is the new game from Pandasaurus, the publisher of Dinosaur Island. I liked but didn't love Dinosaur World. For me, for now, I think after one play, I scored it about a 7.0. And it's a good game. It's a fun game. I thought I was going to like it more than Dinosaur Island, but I really think they're kind of on the same level. So if you like Dinosaur Island and Dinosaur Island appeals to you, I think Dinosaur World will be very, very similar. I had thought that Dinosaur World might take up a little less table space. It doesn't really. It's also a big table hog. And I find that Dinosaur Island as a worker placement game, it's a fun theme. It's very colorful, and I like the bright colors there. Both of those things are also true of Dinosaur World, but I find Dinosaur Island to be kind of fiddly. It's very fiddly with all the tracks and things, but there's nothing really complex about it. You're just moving a lot of trackers around. You're doing kind of a lot of fiddly things that if you were playing it like as a computer game would kind of all happen behind the scenes. So you're kind of doing all that, but there's just not the complexity that I would like from it. And I don't find the gameplay compelling. I find the theme compelling for Dinosaur Island. I find the color scheme compelling. I don't really find the gameplay compelling. So Dinosaur Island for me is a game that I like but don't love. I'll play it if someone wants to play it. I didn't really feel the need to purchase it because I'm kind of a completist and I would want to get everything for it. And I felt that I didn't need to put out that kind of money for a game that is kind of humdrum, in my opinion. I mean, it's a solid medium weight worker placement game. The problem is there are a lot of those out there, a lot. And there are many games in that kind of similar complexity level that I think are better that I would play first. Doesn't mean that I don't like Dinosaur Island. It just means that it's good. It's okay. There are just a lot of games out there in that same category. And with that many games, percentage-wise, there is a huge chance, and in my opinion, this is true, for a good number of games to be better than Dinosaur Island. And I thought when I pledged Dinosaur World that it might be a little more compelling. I thought some of those gameplay choices might represent, I don't know, a step forward in this, Dinosaur Pandasaurus universe. Having played the game now, I don't think that that is true. It just is different, but really not any better or worse. So it's a fun game. I don't plan on selling it anytime soon. I would like to play it a few more times. But if I was walking around my collection and kind of picking out which games to save, if I had to, get rid of a bunch of them, I probably wouldn't save Dinosaur World. So 7.0, like it but don't love it. Not really a long-term keeper. And I do plan on doing a first impressions video for Dinosaur World as well, hopefully this week. So you can keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, before I wrap the video, I would like to do a quick what's coming and kind of update you with some of my plans for the channel. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that I've had a lot going on personally in the last month. I haven't been able to produce as many videos as I would have liked. That's starting to change. I'm going to be producing more videos again now, but all this time I've been talking about how I wanted to get first impressions videos done for Embarcadero and Kemet Blood and Sand. But I've been saying that now for many weeks, and time has gone by. And if I were to produce those videos now, it is no longer timely. Also, My personal opinion on Kemet Blood and Sand, not having played the original Kemet, is that it's good and I like it. And I like the miniatures. And I guess it's kind of like Dinosaur World for me. I give it a 7.0. I know in the old version they had little dice that stood in for the temples, and you would just turn the dice to whatever side to indicate whether you had 1, 2, 3, or 4 steps of your temple built. It was a very ingenious solution to do very cheaply, just using 4-sided dice. For the new version, they've actually made little plastic pyramids in different pieces, so you can kind of build them on the board as you play. I also, when I pledged it, I got a really nice big oversized neoprene mat for it. And there are a lot of great miniatures in the game. And I think the strength for Kemet Blood and Sand has to do with the tiles that you put out and how you build things. But for me, I'm not a huge fan of dudes on a map games when they are just area control. I find games like that, when that's all that they have going on, to be kind of boring. I want a lot more Euro mechanics in my area control dudes on a map games. And Kemet doesn't really get there for me. So this is a game that I think fulfills a purpose in my collection in terms of having a good solid game like that. It's just not a game that I personally am always going to want to go to. So it's a game that I see staying in my collection for a while, but kind of like Dinosaur World, not a game that I would feel the need to keep if I was really kind of pruning things down to the essentials. I also recently got a game in called Tsukiyumi Full Moon Down. That is also a dudes on the map game, and that has some kind of crazy factions. You've got walking panda bears, one of which rides a tiger. You've got mechs. You've got insects. Just kind of all these wildly different factions in a post-apocalyptic game where the theme in Tsukiyumi is that the moon is actually touching one of the Earth's oceans. So there's been this apocalyptic event, and there are these factions left on the planet, warring factions. But the number of miniatures that you play with different factions can be wildly different. There's one faction that's just a few robots. There's another faction that is, I think, 30 or 40 insects. And there are a lot of very different divergent factions. So I think for me, I need to play Tsukiyumi Full Moon Down. But I think my enjoyment of it and its variability and the different ways that it does things, I think that's going to eclipse Kemet. This is the long way around to me saying that I don't really feel a need to do a first impressions for Kemet Blood and Sand. I don't even think it's relevant at this point. At some point in the future, maybe I'll do a full teach and review. And certainly if that's something that you would like, let me know in the comments below, and I can bump it up in terms of that production schedule just to know that people want to see that. As for the other one, Embarcadero, again, I think it's too late for a first impressions video on it. However, I love Embarcadero. I think it's a great game. I think I have it rated about an 8.5 or a 9. It's not that far below Coffee Traders and Excavation Earth on my current top 2021 list. So it's a really good game. I think what I'm going to do with this one is do a full teacher review on it. And that's something that will probably happen sooner rather than later, but it's still going to happen after I kind of catch up with other first impressions videos. However, just know that I am cutting some of those older games that are now, 6 months out from my first impressions slate. And my goal moving forward here is to produce about 4 videos a week. So this video will continue to be one of those. Once a month, I will do a Game of the Month video, which means that the other weeks, I will probably be doing 1 to 2 first impressions videos a week and 1 to 2 full teach and review videos a week. So as I move forward now, the first 2 first impressions videos that I'm going to produce will be Coffee Traders and Dinosaur World. From there, I will just be doing the first impressions videos on whatever is newest to me, whatever is kind of hot off the presses from retail or Kickstarters that have just delivered. And as I complete those, I will go back and catch up with things as long as they're still within that 6-month window. And then as time goes on and I'm getting kind of fewer games in, I will have more time to spend on those teach and reviews. And the next month will probably be spent with me getting current with first impressions videos. And then once I hit December, they should be less frequent, just the new stuff, and I should be doing more teach and reviews. So after Coffee Traders and Dinosaur World, here are the new games that I have, including those that are kind of shipping to me right now that I plan to do first impressions videos on. Anno 1800, possibly Brew if I decide to kind of go back for that one. Now I think I may, because Brew is a very light, easy game to learn and teach, and it's a game that I want to play. And I just don't think it's going to take me a lot of time to produce a video for that one. And that is kind of on the outside of what I think I should be working on right now. I think it was in July when that game was published. So it still sort of qualifies, and I will squeeze it in if I can, and I think it may be easy to do so. From there, the other games that I'm looking at producing these videos for this month are Imperial Steam, Tsukiyumi Full Moon Down, and Unsettled. And then when it shows up, when it delivers later in the month, Role Player Adventures. So that is the slate. Those games will be getting the first impressions treatment. And after that, you'll just have to watch what's arriving, and you'll know that those are the games I will be doing first impressions videos on. I also do have a handful of games that I've received recently that I pledged and got them like with expansions or with a kind of a reprint with expansions. And so these are games that I don't really feel I should be doing a first impressions video for because the games themselves are not new. But I like these games, and they do have extra content that I think I would like to look at as well. So one thing I am considering doing for the future, as I get caught up on first impressions videos for the other games that I've mentioned, is doing full teach and reviews for these games that would include their expansion content. So this would include Glenmore Games with the recently delivered Glenmore 2 Highland Games, Grand Austria Hotel with the recent Let's Waltz expansion, Tinner's Trail, which has a couple of expansions in that. It's a new edition of the game, a new printing, but there was some redesigning done, and there's some new kind of module expansions. So I may look at Tinner's Trail. Rurik Stone and Blade, which is an expansion for the original Rurik base game. So I got the base game now, but it's not new. So if I do a video on the new expansion, I need to also cover the base game. So that would be another one I would potentially do that for. And then finally the Merlin Deluxe Big Box, which has everything together, the base game and a couple expansions. So those are some games that I don't feel that I can do a first impressions video on, but where I like the games, and I'm considering doing a teach and review that looks at all of their content and not just the base game. So that's something I'm theorizing about. Let me know in the comments section if that's content that you would like. Apart from that, I will probably be choosing games to do teach and reviews for based on games that I just want to do the teach and review on, games that are compelling to me and I want to play it more and teach it. Sometimes games that are currently on the BGG Hot 50, because those are obviously games that there's an audience for, that people want more information about. So I think it makes sense to put out content that is actually desired. And then finally, new stuff. As stuff comes in, I'll be doing first impressions videos that hopefully won't be as long as they've been in the past, but will show off some of the features of the game and what makes it special and may make people want to play it or not. But the games that I have more to say and that I really kind of want to teach to you guys, I'll probably also target those newer games for teach and reviews. So that's kind of what I have planned moving forward. Also, I still am playing some games from 2020 that I never got to, but soon, within the next couple of months, I will be putting out probably my top 30 games of 2020. Following that, I was going to do a top 100 games of all time. In looking at the games I've played, I have enough to do maybe even 300 or 400 games, but I think I'm just going to cap it at 200. But I'm considering doing 200 instead of 100. Now, that will take more time, and it may cut into some of the other videos that I can produce. So let me know if you think that that's something that you would like to see. I don't know how many people have actually done a top 200 list. I think there are a couple of people at the Dice Tower that have done it, maybe Tom. So I think it would be something kind of interesting to have out there, because I'm sure there are games that will be in the top 100 to 200 that will be a little bit different than the kind of games you're always seeing in people's top 100 lists. It'll be interesting to see, I think, what games sneak into the top 1 to 200 that may be a little bit less known and maybe interesting for people to learn about. Now, when I do that list, my friend Ryan Everly is probably going to come in and join me for the top 50. So the top 50 of that list will be both of ours. And you'll get to see us talk about each other's selections. And then after I complete that video series, I'll be doing my top probably 30 games of 2021. And hopefully you'll see that in the first quarter of 2022. And around the time that I do that and my top 100 or 200, I will likely also be launching a Patreon. And so in the future, people who support me on Patreon will have some input in the types of videos that I produce and what content is featured in those videos. So these are all things just for the future to be aware of, but I'm excited about that, and I thought you might be excited to hear what's coming. Thank you very much for watching. I hope everyone out there is having a great weekend. Please don't forget to like the video. It helps me out a lot. And if it was helpful for you personally and you want to see more of this kind of content in the future, subscribe. If you want to be notified whenever I produce a video in the future, you can also hit the alarm bell after you've subscribed, and that way you will get notifications. So let me know what you're thinking about backing this week. We can compare notes. We'll meet back here next week and you can see what I actually backed from this week's selections. Play lots of great games this week, have a lot of fun, and remember to always be excellent to each other. Take care. See you soon.